Hello, I'm Emma Desi, and welcome to another episode of Turning Readers into Writers. If you're brand new here, welcome, and here's what you need to know. This is a community that believes you are never too old to write your first novel. No matter what you've been up to until now, if you're ready to write your book, I'm ready to help you reach the end. I focus on helping you find the time and confidence to begin your writing journey, as well as the craft and skills you need to finish the book. Each week I interview debut authors, editors and industry experts to keep you motivated, inspired and educated on all things writing, editing and publishing. If you want to catch up, head on over to emmadesi.com where you'll find a wealth of information and tools to help you get started. Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 Top Tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Carol Saller's book, The Subversive Copy Editor, is all about win-win strategies for editors and writers. A book Publishers Weekly called practical, relentlessly supportive, and full of Ed-head laughs. Her middle grade novel, Eddie's War, was a best book at Kirkus, Bank Street, and the Chicago Public Library, and a Horn Book recommended verse narrative. As a children's book editor and long-term manuscript editor at the University of Chicago Press, Carol Saller has read thousands of queries and drafts by writers of everything from picture books to scholarly monographs. She has a career's worth of industry knowledge to help writers prepare their work for publication. She lives in Chicago, writes full-time, and sings in a choir. So let's delve into our conversation. And she really does have a lot of experience to share with you, particularly if you are looking to find an agent and you want to go down the traditional route. She really does have some kind of backstreet knowledge, if you like, and will give you the scoop on what you should be thinking about, how important it is to be resilient and not to give up. Something that Carol is experiencing herself, and she's very candid and very open and sharing her own journey to publication and what happens once you found publication as well. So let's delve in and have a chat with Carol. Well, Carol, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm looking forward to delving in and chatting to you.
Thank you, Emma. I'm delighted to be here.
So I wonder if you wouldn't mind just sort of starting off by telling us about your journey to editing and ultimately to writing as well.
Well, it was sort of the other way around. Well, maybe simultaneous, but for all of my adult life, I have been editing and writing. My first job in editing was a bit of a chance opportunity when after college I really didn't know what I was going to do, and I was in the careers office looking through folders, and I was looking at the publishing folder, and the attendant, are you looking at the publishing folder? There's a man on the phone who has a job. And that was my first job at a magazine. And that's when I was given the Chicago Manual of Style and really could hardly put it down. I enjoyed reading it so much, and I learned how to copy edit there and do research. And the job was fact checking and copy editing. And so it just went on from there.
That's like,
and yeah, I think so. And while I was at that job, I also had some opportunities to write for the magazine. So it also started me on my writing career.
Fantastic, fantastic. So let's talk about the sort of editing side of things first, and then obviously I'd love to hear about your own books as well. Um, is it, especially if I think about this modern day, the age of self-publishing, indie publishing, do you think that a writer needs to hire an editor these days, if there's particularly if they're not wanting to go down the route of one of the big publishers? Is it still necessary?
Um, I think it's a very personal question that every writer has to ask themselves. And I think most writers have a kind of instinct for whether their own writing, whether they feel like it's up to the standard that they see in published work. And I would say if you really have no idea whether you need an editor or not, it's probably a good sign that you do need one, because I think it's probably a sign that you haven't done enough reading in your chosen field of writing. The more you read books like the ones that you want to write, the more you'll get a sense of the standard, of the standard of fluency and grammar and other kinds of things, and the more sense you'll have of whether you're falling short of what you think of as that kind of book. So another way to tell is if you give your work, as everyone should, to friends, relatives, and beta readers for some advice on how they think you're doing. And this is during the drafting stage, when you would be sharing your work, maybe with a writer's group, or in a group of the kind that you sponsor and coach. If you're getting people will usually be super polite, and but there's always someone who can't resist pointing out your errors, either your grammar or spelling errors and things like that. And if you get that, you might consider that you at least need a copy editor. So there are those two different kinds: people who can help you with the overall character development and arc of your story, that kind of developmental editor, and then also the copy editors who will help you clean up all kinds of little boogers in your line-to-line writing.
Yes, I think the copy editing or the line editing always makes me giggle a little bit, because as writers we're unaware of the habits that we fall into, I think, and the common words that we use. We're not always aware of that we might have a repetitious word a lot of the time, and the line editing can really pull that up. And some of the things have made me laugh that I've picked up. But one of the things I was curious to get your opinion on, because I hear this from writers quite a bit, is, well, I don't need an editor because I've got ProWriting Aid, or I've got Grammarly, and that picks up everything I need to pick it up, or I've got a good eye for detail myself. I don't need to hire somebody to do that for me. My own feeling on that is, oh, that's a risky game. I think that you do need to hire an editor. I think that is a very important part of, even, if you're self-publishing, you still need to do that. But have you had that response from people to say, oh, well, I've got ProWriting Aid, I don't need to hire anybody?
Well, yes, of course. And I agree with you completely. I can only point to the fact that for all of my editing career, the books that I've been copy editing are written by people with PhDs. Some of them have PhDs in English and teach language and English and grammar to students, and they still understand that they cannot edit or copy edit their own work. It's just the idea that when you write something, you're working at a certain level that is not the micro level of style and grammar. You're not going to necessarily be focusing on whether you put a hyphen in bodice ripper on page 3. Now that you're on page 95, you're just going to write it. You're going to have a million inconsistencies, even in spelling of a character's name. People, especially fantasy writers, the names, they get pretty wild. And if you're not keeping a style sheet, which is another topic that we could talk about. Or if, you just don't want to slow down, it's not your job. That is not the writer's job to be keeping track of a million details like that. That's the editor's job. And that's why it's important to hire one if you want that professional quality, because readers, believe it or not, some will notice, some will struggle with a character's name at the beginning, and so they'll pay attention to it when they first encounter it, which means that they might notice that, wait, is this the same one? Or I once drafted a novel where I was well into toward the ending, and I realized that I had two characters named Edward. How does that happen? I don't know, but at least I did discover it eventually. So yes, it's no judgment on a writer that they need a copy editor. It's actually more of a judgment if they think they don't. It's an arrogance and foolishness that any professional publisher will recognize in an amateur writer, that they feel like they don't need that. So
yeah, we can't catch our own errors, can we? Just as you've exemplified with the two Edwards. But I wanted to, you mentioned a style sheet there. So I wonder if you would tell us, what is a style sheet, and how is it useful to a writer?
Yeah, a style sheet for a writer doesn't have to be as detailed and technical as the one that a copy editor would keep, but just a simple alphabetical listing of your characters' names and things about them, if they have blue eyes or anything that you mentioned that you might contradict later accidentally. Just keep track of them as you write. Every time you add a character, put their name in that alphabetical list. And then when you're all done writing, read through your style sheet to see if there are any contradictions. And you'll find that you'll probably find a few things that you need to fix. I also find my style sheet really useful. It's not just characters' names, but also any names of towns or anything with a capital letter. You should put in their organizations and this kind of thing. But I find it useful because now not everyone will agree with this, but I find it difficult when I'm reading a book and there are characters with names that are similar. I don't want any character names to be similar in my book. I don't want an Angie and an Angelina and I don't even want two women whose names start with A. So in my style sheet, because they're in alphabetical order, as I add names, I always choose a name that is different from all the other names and starts with a different letter. And if you get into books that have more than 26 characters, then you're going to have to fudge that rule. But I think it's a good rule of thumb to diversify your names.
I agree, actually, and more just to save my own confusion. I have to admit, I've worked on a few manuscripts with students, and either they've got two characters that have the same name, or, as you say, two characters with very, very similar names, and I find it quite hard to keep the characters differentiated in my brain, and they end up kind of melding together. So it's something I agree with you about that just to keep things clear and simple, give them different names.
And you can bet that if you get confused, the reader is going to be even more confused. Another great thing about a style sheet is that you can send that style sheet to your copy editor or editor, or later your proofreader. I mean, they will love you for it because it saves them a ton of work and confusion.
Good tip there. Pro tip from Carol there. So thinking about your experience with the writers that you've worked with and edited for, how have you noticed a pattern, or have you noticed that some writers are better suited to self-publishing, or are some writers better suited to traditional publishers? How can a writer decide whether to go one route or go the other?
Yeah, here I think the first question you have to ask is, what is your goal? I mean, if your goal is to make a lot of money or to um, to get books into people's hands, even if you don't make a lot of money from it, um, whether you want physical books or whether just ebooks would be fine, um, and whether you are technically adept or whether you're going to have to be hiring a lot of people to do stuff like that. How much money are you willing to spend if you aren't able to do all the pre-publication stuff yourself? And I would say that the best bets for self-publishing are, well, the best bet is a celebrity who already has a big following, because they're not going to have to do that much marketing. Their books are going to succeed probably in self-publishing. Someone who's an expert on a topic. If you're writing nonfiction and you have that platform and the qualifications to be credible, your diet book or your master gardening book or something is probably going to find its audience, especially if you already have an online platform and social media. If you're a writer of genre fiction in series, fantasy series or a romance series, even if you're unknown, sometimes those writers can do well on self-publishing because they have if you have a series and you're doing ebooks, you have options for marketing where you can sell those early volumes cheap and suck people into buying subsequent books at the higher price. And then the last group I would recommend self-publishing to is if you have something that you really don't think is marketable, you just want to see it in printed form on your shelf, or you want to be able to give it even in ebook form to all your relatives or something like that, and you have the money to do it, then I would say self-publishing is also good for that. Things that don't work very well in self-publishing are books that require color, like picture books. They're expensive to produce if you want physical books. They're going to be expensive to print, which means they're going to have a high cover price. Or a coffee table book of some kind that has color photos. That's also going to be difficult. And even something like a chapter book or a middle grade novel, to do well with books for small children. Small children don't buy books, adults do. They don't read ebooks. A lot of the success of the books that you know and love for children has come about because they were in your child's library or in the public library, and teachers and librarians buy books that have been vetted through the journals, the children's book review journals. There are about 5 or 6 of them that are just, those classic Hornbook, school library journal and whatever, and they tend not to review self-published books. So if you want to get into the schools and the libraries, then self-publishing lessens your chance of being noticed in that world. So can you think of other?
If you want to be nominated, if you want to be a prize winner of some description, then indie publishing is definitely not the route to go down. You definitely want to be thinking about finding an agent and getting in with one of the, not necessarily one of the big houses, but you want to be with a reputable publisher who is known for publishing literary stories that will end up having a chance of being paid for to be put into those prizes. So I think that would be another one I'd add to that list, that it's better to go traditional with.
Right. I do. There are a lot of prizes and awards out there now for indie books. And that's something to be a little wary of. A lot of them charge money to enter and they give everyone a prize. So if you want to go that route, just be sure to investigate.
Yeah, but it can be nice on your biography. So if you've got that money to spare and you want that accolade, go for it. And but so
Right.
looking at those two differences, um, what choices have you made for your own publishing career, both for your non-fiction and then for your fiction? What was the path that you decided to take?
All my books are traditionally published, although I have to say they were published in a different era when the landscape was very, very different. Um, I I almost never had to submit anything. The first children's book I published 30 years ago, I submitted it to 5 publishers and one of them bought it. And then they just kept publishing everything I wrote. That is not going to happen today. And with those are my children's books. For my adult nonfiction book, it was related to my work, and I worked for a publisher, and they encouraged me to write it, and it was so there was that support all along, and kind of a foregone deal that they would publish it, and um, that one was that was in 2009, and it's since come out in a second edition, and has done very well. So now, though, I um, I would like to go back to writing children's books, and I'm finding it very difficult to get my foot back in that door.
That's interesting. So even
Yeah.
though you've got a proven track record, if you like, with a traditional publisher, it's still not an easy shoe in for you. You've still got to go through a few hoops as well.
Well, that's right. The original publisher of years ago doesn't publish the kind of thing that I'm writing now.
Yeah.
I'm writing middle grade, and they are mostly picture books and mostly nonfiction. Um, and the publisher of my most recent, my young adult novel, Eddie's War, is retiring. It's a very small private publishing company, and Stephen Roxburgh is retiring, and he's reverting all the rights to the writers. So I even have to decide whether to let that book die or publish it myself. And it's one of those very quiet historical fiction books that got lots of starred reviews, and it's on the best lists at Kirkus and Bank Street, but it hasn't sold many copies. I don't think any other publisher would pick it up, and I'm heartbroken. I really don't know what to do.
I think thank you for sharing with us, Carol. That's a very vulnerable thing to share, especially, I can see that you love this book and it's been a big part of you, but you've exemplified there for us, I think, that publishing is ever changing. It's changing faster than it's ever changed in the past. The last, since around 2009, 2010, since Kindle launched, really, the face of publishing has just changed dramatically, and what we could take for granted 10 years ago we can't now. And I think it's just really useful for new writers just to be aware of that, not for it to put anybody off, not for it to fade anybody's dreams, but just to go into the publishing world with your eyes open and know that, yes, oh my goodness, the excitement of writing our first book, and we think once we've written the book, that's it, we've done it, it's all great. But actually, it's just the start of the story. Finding an agent is just the start of the story, and there's a long way to go beyond there. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, and just kind of giving us a heads up that the book itself is just the beginning.
Yeah, but if you finished a book, you're way ahead of a lot of other people, and new books are published every single thousands of them are, thousands and thousands are published every year. So there are lots of success stories, and I think the main thing is to define what you think would be success, and not be disappointed if your success is different from someone else's.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. I think we don't think about that when we're first start writing. Certainly I didn't. all I was concerned about was, can I finish this book and then can I get it out into the world? And it's only latterly have I realized I've got to set this definition for myself. I've got to set my aspirations for myself. What do I want from my writing? Is it just to put them out in the world? Is it to get 5-star reviews? Is it to make an income? Is it to find a publisher? Whatever it might be. But I think the more you can put that thought in at the beginning, it will just make it a little bit smoother for you as you go forward and you hit those bumps in the road, which, you know, inevitably you will. We all do. So talk to us a little bit about the different types of publishing houses that there are. Is it indie publishing and the big five, or the big four, is it now? It might even be the big three now. Is there anything in between? What are the different levels that people can consider publishing with?
Well, sure. There are a lot of smaller presses, and in some ways that might be a better bet depending on what you're publishing. I think every writer has to do their own research, where you go online and you Google something like publishers of dog stories or publishers of cookbooks or whatever you write, and start looking at the mid-level ones. If you buy a book, something like Writers and Illustrators Market, which is also available online, you can do some searching in that by category as well, or go to Amazon and look at similar books to yours and look at who published them. There are a lot of different ways to start researching who might be interested in what you're doing. And a lot of those smaller presses don't necessarily work with agents. You can submit directly to them. So it might be a better option for some people.
Yeah, definitely. And so do you just send your manuscript in to those small presses, or is there a process to that?
There's always a process, and the first rule is always to research what the process of that publisher is by going to their website and looking at submission guidelines, which will be on every single publisher website. And a lot of them now use online forms that you fill out, where you put in your bio and your experience or not experience, and you they'll tell you how many pages you want to dump into the box, and you submit it through that kind of software. That's very common. Others will give an email address and ask you to attach something, or others will want you to paste into the email and never attach anything. So it's very important to look at their guidelines. They usually will say, we will not even open an attachment, or we will not consider someone who emails us instead of using the online form. So they're usually pretty strict. And you know, it makes it easier for the writer if they just tell me what to do.
And will they also tell you how to format the submission that you're handing in as well?
They will usually give, if they want physical, by that I mean, if they want attachments, if they want Microsoft Word documents, which is almost always that, or a PDF is what they're going to ask for, they will probably give some minimal formatting requirements. You know, they'll say 1-inch margins, double spaced, page number on every page, and this kind of thing. But there's a lot more to formatting a professional looking manuscript that a writer would do well to investigate. And it's actually something that is my expertise, preparing manuscripts for submission. And there's a blog post that's free you can look at called how to format my novel, or something like that. It's at the Chicago Manual of Style blog, CMOS Shop Talk. So if you just Google that, that'll give you a default format that's absolutely standard throughout publishing. And of course, if any publisher expresses a preference for something that contradicts that, you would follow the publisher's preference. But but my format would give you a good default format to work with so that you can just make a couple of tweaks if necessary for sending it to any agent or editor.
Well, that's a highly useful resource you've given us there. Thank you. I'll make sure I link to that for people. So that's one of your areas of expertise. Do you help writers with that currently? Is that something that they can hire your services for?
No, I don't. I don't actually have any services that I offer other than speaking. I do public speaking and conference speaking and webinars, but no, it's all free advice. So at my website, Subversive Copy Editor, you can find a lot of advice for how to get your manuscripts into shape. And everything that I have published at the Chicago Manual of Style blog is double posted at the Subversive Copy Editor. So that's actually probably an easier place to find it. So if you go to the Subversive Copy Editor and click around, you'll find plenty of good advice on grammar and style and ways to format.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I'll link to that. And so I'm curious, in your years as a long-time manuscript editor, what are some of the more sort of common mistakes or errors that you've seen writers make that are easy fixes for people who might be at that stage now?
Oh yeah. Well, there are a lot of easy fixes. I would say failure to put page numbers is one major mistake. This really only becomes a problem when an agent or an editor asks you for your full manuscript. Up until that point, you don't really have to worry about it. But to make it a habit every time you start a manuscript is just a good idea. There are a million reasons why in the publishing process, someone might print out part of your manuscript or in some way need the page numbers. So doing that is very important. A lot of writers try to make the mistake of trying to format their manuscripts to look kind of like the finished product without understanding that before a book is published, it's not supposed to be pretty. It's ugly. It's double spaced, which is, even though there are fewer and fewer reasons why an editor or an agent or a publisher would need that because of changes in technology, it's still the tradition, it's still the convention, it's still absolutely the default. So just do it, just double space. And of course, the books you read from the bookstore, they're not double spaced. It's just a completely different thing. A typeset book is not a manuscript. So that manuscript, another very important thing in a manuscript is that the sides, the margins are not straight. The left margin is straight, but the right margin is ragged. And a lot of writers will choose that straight-sided look because they think it looks better, but in fact, it's just agony for anyone to read a manuscript that's been where the word spaces are all over the place because some lines have fewer words than others and they're stretched out, and other lines are squashed to make it line up on that right side. So just don't ever, and an agent or an editor, all they have to do is select the whole document and click left justify. It's a 10-second fix for them. But they've already said to themselves, this person has obviously never been through the publishing process before. They've already made a little judgment that you're going to need more advice. You're going to need more hand-holding. And they have 10 other manuscripts that are great stories that look great. So which one are they going to move ahead with? It just pays to control the things you can control so that someone reading your work isn't distracted by those little gaffes and can focus on what you're saying and what your story is about.
It's quite terrifying, isn't it? Those little things, but it's so true. It's human nature. We do make those unconscious judgments about things. And as a new writer, we want to make sure we make it as easy as possible for an editor or a publisher to say yes. So a really good tip there: do not justify the the page. So thank you for that. You've taken us through some really great tips for editing, for formatting, and what to look out for when we get to that stage of the process. But I would love to talk to you too about your books and your stories. And one that you've mentioned is your middle grade novel, Eddie's War. So I'd love it if you could tell us something about that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, this book is very close to my heart. Although it is fiction, it was inspired by some diaries that my father wrote when he was a boy, between the ages of 12 and 18, that I never knew about. I didn't know until after he died. And his wife sent me the diaries. And they took place between 1942 and 1949. So World War II was in there. And he lived out in the country on a farm that I grew up visiting grandma, my whole life. I still visit the farm, although now the generation younger than me lives there. And the diary was filled with amazing information and detail about those years, that especially farming information, which I didn't grow up on the farm, and I didn't know. I mean, I was 20 before I knew that when they talked about growing corn and beans, they meant soybeans. I always thought they meant green beans. so this diary gave me the kind of authentic detail that I could put in my book about a boy growing up on the farm during World War II. All of the, if I needed any kind of detail about what he was doing at a particular moment on the farm, if I needed teenagers to be doing some farm work in June of 1944, I could just go to the diary and read, we were in the calf pasture cutting mullein. And I don't even know what that means, but it just would go straight into the book. And the efficiency of that, rather than trying to Google what would teenagers be doing on a farm in central Illinois in 19, I mean, I couldn't buy that kind of research. It was an amazing resource. And it also ended up giving me, I'd say there are about 70 or 80 little scenes in this book, vignettes. They're not chapters. They're more like slices of life. And about 6 or 7 of them come right out of the diary. I'll give you just one example of a snippet that I read in the diary. My dad only wrote a couple of lines a day, very short little 5-year diaries, but one of them that he wrote said, this afternoon we dug 4 little foxes out of the hill at Merle's, brought them home and put them in the silo pit. So I was able to make a story out of that, and many others that I think not only provided some drama, because what happened to those foxes was pretty dramatic, but also made the book very personal to me. And when my father, of course, was already gone by the time it was published, but his brother was able to read it, and all of my cousins who actually grew up on that farm, they really enjoyed reading it as well, and pointed out a few errors.
Of course. So it's lovely. So it sounds like there's sort of a series of interconnected stories about that period in time. Does that sound about right? Or
no, it's actually, there is a central character. Eddie is he's the narrator, and he's in every scene. but it pulls together a large cast of characters from this small town and farming community, and it's Eddie's older brother goes off to fight in the war as a bomber pilot in the Pacific, and but the book is about the boy who stays home, and it's a coming of age story. It's kind of one of those, he's a quiet, thoughtful kid who reads newspapers. And although there is hunting and sports and a little romance, something for everyone, and a lot of drama because of some strained relationships and a mysterious arson fire.
Okay, so a lot of drama going on.
Yeah.
And so what are you working on at the moment? Because I know that you write full time. So what are you currently working on?
Well, the only thing that that's for sure I'm working on is that I still blog once a month for the Chicago Manual of Style. But then, so that's my only professional work. For my writing, I am still full bore into middle grade, and I have 3 finished novels that I would like to sell, and my struggles over sending those out, trying to even find a strategy for finding an agent. I've done so much homework and so little submitting that I really need someone to take me by the scruff of the neck and force me to send these things out. But even just deciding, is it a mistake to send out more than one at the same time? Those are hard decisions to make. And now I'm back to a strategy of only sending out one and not to too many agents at one time. And yesterday, as long as it's the confessional, I had the world's record rejection. I sent out my query. It took me an hour to tailor this query to this agent and fill in her online form. I sent it out at 4:54 p.m. and at 5:09 p.m. I got the form letter rejection.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
I think it was actually better that way. I laughed. My first response was to laugh. I just pictured her saying, "Oh, get it off of me! Get it off of me!" and flinging it back. And I thought, well, she saved me. Why not cut to the chase? The longer someone has your work, and there's some radio silence involved here. I've sent it off to some agents who just have not replied in a year, and so I marked them as closed.
Yeah.
But that's always in the back of your mind as a little dangling thread, loose thread, just to take her off the table. I feel like I didn't have time to invest in hope.
Okay. Yeah, very pragmatic approach. Yeah, I know now I can move on.
Yeah.
And it's a numbers game, isn't it, with the looking for an agent and selling a story. It really is a numbers game. And we, when we're at home submitting, we don't know what kind of a day that agent's had or what else has appeared on their table in that week, what else they've got coming out in the near future. Will our story tie in with what they've got? Does it fit their brand and what it is that they're trying to put out through their press? There's so many variables. We can only, I think you said it earlier, you can only control what you can control, and we have to remember that.
That's right. And when you said numbers, I watched a webinar a few weeks ago on rejection, and it was very helpful. I almost didn't watch it, but then I thought, okay, I'm experiencing rejection. Let's see if this will help me. And it was amazing. First of all, though, I have to say it was a little traumatic because in the lead up, I signed up for it a couple months ago, and they kept sending me reminders for this webinar. And every time they sent a reminder, in my inbox, there was in the word rejection in all capital letters. I thought, That wasn't good. But yeah, the panel, it was a panel of very successful writers, and they all well, first of all, they told how much they'd been rejected, which is always reassuring. I mean, they've been rejected dozens and dozens and dozens of times. But the one that really struck me was a writer who said that for the last 5 years, her goal has been to query at least once a week. She sends 50 queries a year, and she said her response rate is about, she gets about 5 responses.
Okay.
Asking for the manuscript or for more. Not 5 acceptances, 5 responses that ask for something. And I thought, I haven't even sent out 50 altogether. And here she has literally sent out hundreds of pitches. Mm-hmm. So, and others, of course, you can, if you've attended any of these conferences or whatever, the published writers will say, this book had 70 rejections. They say, don't stop till you've had 100. Don't lose heart until you've had 100 rejections. And until you've had those rejections, you haven't really given your work its chance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So true.
But the critical thing was not just to send it out to 100 publishers, or even 20 or even 10. The critical thing is that every time you get a rejection, you refine and revise and up your game. And it's through that process of getting better and better, and not just to improve your pitch, but also to go back over your first 5 pages, 10 pages, 30 pages, and refine and improve and upgrade those as well. And every time you've been away from it for a while, when you get a rejection and you read it over again, all of a sudden, all the bad things in it jump out at you. You think, oh, why did I say that? This could be better. This could be better. Mm-hmm. So it's that refinement that will ultimately lead to a better result.
Well, that is a wonderful place to end, Carol. I think that is, a good positive note there, just to keep refining, keep going. Before we say goodbye, though, please do let our listeners know where they can find out more about you and your books.
Thank you. I would start at carolsaller.com, and it will lead you to everything else. There's a link to my books and buy buttons on the books. So, and then there's a link to my blog where there's all that free advice.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure I link to those in the show notes. Carol, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Emma.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.